My name is William, and for over 30 years I believe that my marriage to Linda was the epitome of success, a union built on hard work, shared dreams, and the comfort of a life of luxury. Together, we built an empire from the ground up. I rose to become a millionaire through relentless dedication, while Linda played the role of the devoted wife and the gracious hostess of our opulent home. Our life was filled with fine dinners, expensive vacations, and elegant soirees that impressed even the most discerning critics. I took pride in the image of our perfect life, convinced that our mutual success and wealth had cemented a bond that could weather any storm. Yet, as the years went by, subtle changes began to creep into our otherwise flawless routine. Linda, always graceful and composed in public, began to exhibit moments of distraction and wistfulness that I initially attributed to the pressures of maintaining our high society lifestyle. I noticed that she would often lose herself in thought during quiet evenings, and that her smile sometimes faltered when our conversation drifted toward memories of her youth. At first, I chalked these signs up to the natural process of aging and the burdens of a life lived under constant scrutiny. But as time passed, I couldn't shake a growing sense of unease. It started with late-night phone calls. Linda's phone would light up at odd hours, and she would step away to take her calls with a secretive smile. I assumed these were work-related or trivial personal matters. Yet, there were times when I caught her glancing at the screen with a spark of excitement in her eyes, an expression I had never seen before. I tried to dismiss it, convincing myself that even the most loving partners have private moments. However, the subtle signals began to accumulate like pieces of a puzzle that didn't quite fit together. One rainy evening, I returned home earlier than expected from a business trip. The house was unusually silent, a stark contrast to the comfortable hum of our life together. I wandered through the spacious rooms and noticed that Linda's belongings had been moved into small, discreet spaces, as if hidden away from view. My curiosity got the better of me when I discovered a locked drawer in her private study. With trembling hands, I managed to unlock it using a spare key I'd once received as a wedding gift. Inside, I found a collection of letters, photographs, and mementos that I had never seen before. I began reading the letters, handwritten notes filled with emotions and confessions that painted a picture of a secret life. The words described moments of passion and vulnerability that contradicted everything I believed about Linda. There were references to a man whose name I did not recognize from our social circles, a man whose humble nature was in stark contrast to the opulence that defined our everyday existence. The shock of the discovery hit me like a tidal wave. Every carefully penned word, every faded photograph, was a testament to a hidden chapter of Linda's life that I had been blissfully unaware of. I spent that night in a state of numb disbelief, rereading the letters and questioning every shared moment of our past. How could I have been so blind? The woman I had adored for decades had harbored a secret so vast that it defied the image of our perfect life. I could feel the weight of betrayal sinking into my bones, and I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. By dawn, as the rain softened outside, I gathered all the evidence into a single folder. With each document I compiled, the reality of Linda's double life became more and more undeniable. I resolved then that I could no longer live in the comfortable illusion of our marital bliss. The truth was a burden I had to confront, even if it meant shattering the facade of perfection I had so carefully maintained for years. As the first light of day crept over the horizon, I sat alone in the study. The evidence spread before me like fragments of a broken mirror reflecting a life I no longer recognized. I knew that the moment of reckoning was near. My heart was heavy with sorrow and disbelief, yet a quiet determination began to kindle within me, a resolve to unearth the truth and face the betrayal head-on, no matter how painful it might be. The days following that fateful night were a blur of despair and confusion. I could no longer ignore the undeniable evidence of Linda's hidden life. Every room in our grand home, every elegant corner, now seemed to whisper secrets of a betrayal I had never suspected. The comfortable routines and familiar laughter were replaced by a suffocating silence and a sense of foreboding that clung to me like a shadow. I began to piece together the timeline of Linda's secret life. The letters indicated a long-standing affair, one that spanned many years, well before the subtle signs became apparent. I recalled instances when Linda had seemed lost in thought, her eyes distant as if recalling a memory that was not ours. Now, those moments were tainted by the realization that she had been living a double life, one that existed far from the glittering world of millionaires and high society that I had always known. Then came the moment that shattered my world completely. While sifting through the letters once more, I found a reference that left me breathless, a note that mentioned meetings at a local diner, a place I knew well. Driven by a mix of desperation and resolve, I decided to visit that diner, hoping to glean some understanding of the man who had stolen my wife's affections. The diner was modest, far removed from the luxury of our usual haunts. It had a worn, everyday charm that belonged to a completely different world, a world where life was simpler and status meant little. As I sat in a quiet corner, I observed the people around me, each absorbed in their own routines. It wasn't long before I noticed a man who caught my attention. He wore a plain uniform emblazoned with the iconic golden arches of McDonald's, a stark, humble figure in a sea of everyday diners. My heart pounded as I recalled the details from the letters. Linda had mentioned a man whose simplicity and authenticity were irresistible, a man who made her feel seen and valued in ways that our opulent life never had. I realized with a sinking feeling that this was the man, the McDonald's worker named Kevin, who had become the object of her secret affection. The thought was almost too surreal to comprehend. My beloved wife, the woman who had graced gala events and lived a life of luxury, had chosen to find solace in the arms of a man who worked at a fast food restaurant. The shock of the discovery left me reeling. How could Linda have let herself be drawn into such a contrasting world? The letters spoke of a magnetic pull, an inexplicable charm that Kevin possessed, qualities that transcended wealth and status. In that moment, my entire life felt upended. The betrayal wasn't just personal. It was a fundamental challenge to everything I had believed about love, success, and the nature of happiness. I spent hours at that diner, my eyes fixed on the door, half expecting Linda to walk in at any moment, laughing as if nothing were amiss. But the truth was undeniable. Kevin was there, a simple man with an unpretentious smile, embodying a life that was worlds apart from the glamour I had always known. My mind raced with questions. When did Linda begin to crave the simplicity and authenticity that Kevin represented? What was it about his humble life that made her abandon the opulent existence we had built together? That evening, I returned home with a heavy heart and a mind filled with turmoil. I gathered all the evidence I had collected, the letters, the photographs, the diner encounter, and prepared myself for a confrontation that I knew would forever change our lives. The taste of betrayal was bitter beyond words, and I felt a profound sense of isolation as I contemplated the future. The comfortable world of luxury and status that I had once taken for granted now seemed like a distant dream, replaced by a harsh reality where love was measured not by wealth, but by the raw, unfiltered desire for authenticity. As I sat alone in the quiet darkness of our study, the images of that humble diner and the plain uniform of a McDonald's worker replayed in my mind. The evidence was clear. Linda had chosen to embrace a different kind of life, a life filled with simplicity, vulnerability, and the promise of genuine connection. Yet, the pain of knowing that the woman I had loved so dearly had traded the security of our prosperous life for a fleeting sense of belonging was almost too much to bear. I wrote feverishly in my journal, each word a desperate attempt to capture the enormity of the betrayal and the shattering impact it had on my soul. I vowed that I would confront Linda with the truth, demanding answers and seeking a resolution, however painful it might be. The road ahead was uncertain, and I knew that the revelation of this secret would irrevocably alter the course of our lives. But I also understood that I could no longer live in the comfortable embrace of ignorance. The truth was out, and I had to face it head-on, no matter the cost. The day of the confrontation arrived with an unbearable tension that seemed to crack the very walls of our luxurious home. I had spent days agonizing over how to bring the truth to light, the secret of Linda's hidden affair with Kevin, the McDonald's worker whose humble world had stolen her heart. My emotions were a turbulent mix of betrayal, sorrow, and an aching need for answers that could explain the unthinkable choice she had made. I found Linda in our elegantly decorated living room, her face calm and composed as if nothing were wrong. But the evidence I had gathered, letters, photographs, and my own memories, spoke a different truth. I approached her slowly, the folder of undeniable proof clutched tightly in my hand. "Linda," I began, my voice wavering between anger and despair, "we need to talk. I know about you and Kevin." For a moment, the room fell silent. Linda's eyes, once warm and familiar, now darted away in panic and regret. I set the folder on the coffee table, letting the evidence speak for itself. How could you do this? I demanded. How could you trade our life, a life of luxury and stability, for the allure of a world so far removed from everything we built together? Linda's lips trembled as she attempted to explain. In a voice laced with sorrow and a hint of defiance, she confessed that over the years she had grown restless. William, I felt suffocated by the endless expectations, the glitter of our wealth, she murmured. I needed to feel real, to be seen for who I am beyond the role of a millionaire's wife. Kevin, he made me feel something different, something genuine. Her words hit me like a bolt of lightning. The very notion that the woman I had loved for decades had felt trapped by the very success we celebrated was a bitter pill to swallow. I listened, heartbroken, as she described how Kevin's simplicity, his down-to-earth nature, and his genuine care had awakened something in her, a longing for authenticity that our lavish life could no longer provide. I know it sounds absurd, she continued, tears welling in her eyes, but with Kevin, I felt alive. I felt like I mattered. The conversation spiraled into a torrent of raw emotion. I questioned her relentlessly, asking when it had all started, how long she had been living this double life, and what it was about Kevin that drew her in. Each answer, each tearful admission, felt like a dagger to my heart. I recalled the nights when I noticed her secretive phone calls, the unexplained absences, and the far-off look in her eyes whenever she mentioned her past. Now, those memories merged into a single, devastating truth. The woman I had once adored had willingly chosen a different path. A path that led her away from our opulent life and into the arms of a humble man whose world was defined by simplicity and authenticity. As the hours passed, the room filled with the painful echoes of our shattered dreams. I felt a profound sense of betrayal. Not only was my trust broken, but the foundation of our entire marriage had been undermined by secrets that spanned decades. The luxurious life we had built together now seemed like a mirage, an illusion that had crumbled under the weight of Linda's hidden desires. By the end of that confrontation, I was left numb, with a heart that ached from the magnitude of the betrayal. I stormed out of the house, not knowing whether to weep or to rage, as the images of Kevin's plain uniform and Linda's tear-streaked face replayed in my mind. That day marked a turning point in my life, a moment when the comfortable illusion of our perfect life was irrevocably shattered, leaving me with a painful, yet inescapable, reality. Later that night, alone in the dark silence of our mansion, I sat down with my journal once again. I wrote feverishly, pouring out my anguish, my questions, and the overwhelming sorrow of a love betrayed. I knew that the journey ahead would be long and fraught with heartache, but I also understood that I could no longer live in a world built on lies. I resolved that I would seek the truth and, no matter how painful it might be, I would reclaim my life from the ruins of this deception. In the weeks and months that followed the shattering confrontation, I found myself standing at the crossroads of despair and the possibility of renewal. The revelation of Linda's affair with Kevin, the man who worked at McDonald's, had torn apart the comfortable fabric of our once perfect life. The betrayal was profound, the pain nearly unbearable, and yet, in the midst of the darkness, I began to sense a faint glimmer of hope, a chance to rebuild my identity from the ashes of deception. I spent those days in deep introspection, turning once again to my journal to record the swirling mix of emotions that threatened to overwhelm me. Each entry was a raw, unfiltered testament to my struggle, the heartbreak of discovering that the woman I loved had chosen the simplicity of a humble life over the opulence we had built together. The sting of betrayal that cut deeper than any financial loss, and the bitter realization that trust, once shattered, was nearly impossible to restore. Yet, amidst the pain, I also discovered the strength that had been hidden within me for years. I began to attend therapy sessions and join support groups for those who had experienced profound betrayal. In those sessions, I learned that healing is not about forgetting the past. It is about integrating its lessons into a new narrative. I came to understand that every scar, every wound, was a mark of survival, a sign that even when life shatters you, there is the potential to rebuild, piece by piece. I also made a concerted effort to reconnect with old friends and rediscover the passions that had long been buried beneath the weight of our luxurious but suffocating life. I started taking long walks, allowing the cool air and the simplicity of nature to remind me that life's true value was not measured in dollars or status, but in moments of genuine connection and self-discovery. Slowly, I began to see that there was a future beyond the betrayal, a future that I could shape with my own hands, even if it meant letting go of the past. One of the most difficult challenges was coming to terms with the fact that Linda's decision to be with Kevin was not solely a personal failing, but a reflection of a deeper void in her own life. While I felt the sting of abandonment, I also realized that our marriage had been built on expectations of perfection that neither of us had fully met. Linda's need for authenticity, for a connection that transcended wealth and status, was something I had overlooked in my own pursuit of success. This painful realization forced me to confront my own shortcomings and to ask difficult questions about what truly defines love and fulfillment. In the midst of this inner turmoil, my resolve to move forward grew stronger. I reached a point where I refused to let the bitterness of betrayal dictate the rest of my life. I made the conscious decision to focus on my own healing, to rebuild my identity on a foundation of honesty, self-respect, and the hard-won lessons of the past. With every sunrise, I took a small step toward a future that was defined not by the pain of yesterday, but by the promise of a new beginning. As I look back on the past few years, the shocking revelation, the painful confrontation, and the slow, arduous process of renewal, I understand that true healing comes not from erasing the scars of betrayal, but from embracing them as symbols of survival and growth. I have learned that even when trust is shattered beyond repair, there is always the possibility of forging a new path, a path that honors the lessons of the past while daring to dream of a future filled with hope. Now, as I stand at the threshold of an unwritten future, I choose to move forward with cautious optimism. I have learned that true healing is not measured by the erasure of pain, but by the courage to face it head-on and to rebuild one's life from the ashes. My journey, a tale of love, betrayal, and the unyielding pursuit of truth, will forever remain a part of who I am. And while the memory of Linda's betrayal and the shock of discovering her hidden affair with a humble McDonald's worker may never fully fade, they have also given me the strength to redefine my identity and to pursue a future filled with hope, dignity, and the promise of renewal.